stand up in front of people, people respond against you. And half the time, or more than half the time, they lie, fabricate, smear your reputation. And this is a very common event. Particularly, they'll say something like, "Oh, you're a socialist. We don't want socialism in this country," kind of thing. And this issue of how to combat that without being impolite, but really being able to sort of push hard, is something that particularly younger people, inexperienced, they're not as confident. And I'm wondering what your advice to this audience, and to me too, when I'm fighting for the disasters in Gaza and all these other things, when the truth is so obvious and the truth is on your side, what is your advice for people who want to get organized and to push forward?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Part of it has to do with the fact that when I say we live in a deodorized civilization, people are reluctant to want to deal with the underside of our society. And yet, they could be in situations that are similar, not in the underside, overnight. So a lot of the same people who, let's say 5 years, were talking about even unemployment benefits being excessive, and then they're unemployed for 6 months, and all of a sudden they become advocates for unemployment benefits. And you understand, you say, you know what, I'm glad I fought for the benefits for you, even though I see you change your mind. That is to say, government can be a force for good, but for so long it's been viewed as a force for good only when it invisibly helped the well-to-do. When it visibly helped the poor and working people, it's called socialism. Did you agree with the Bush and Obama administration when government came in to rescue those big banks? Absolutely, we had to. That was creative. We think those folk having the courage. Oh, really? That is goof gobs, huge, enormous, gargantuan socialism for the rich. But why are you so upset when it comes to working people and poor people? Oh no, they need to accept the consequences of their actions. If they fail, and it's over. They need to learn how to bounce back. Oh, really? If we let the too big to fail, and everyday people are too little to rescue, then maybe the banks ought to be small. Maybe we ought to downsize the mother huckers. You see that? They're too big to manage, they're too big to fail, they're bigger and bigger and bigger and they're bigger now than they were during the crisis. You all ought to know that. Keep track of Elizabeth Warren. You know, people know Elizabeth Warren? She's a serious person. Hard and love, that's not oxymoron. Highly progressive in her own distinctive way. That's the kind of hypocrisy. But again, it has to be done without a sense of either arrogance or self-righteousness. You try to get inside of their situation, their experience, put them in situations where they'll need help and support. And all of a sudden, they're quite willing to accept that. Oh, that means you really are interested in public interest and common good and government being a force for good. When it affects you, I'd be so selfish. There's other folk who actually need help. Just go right ahead. I appreciate that question.
How you doing, Michael?
How you doing, Michael? Good to see you.
Good. Two questions. One, you spoke about bold speech. I wanted to ask you a question specifically about the Tavis Smiley, Al Sharpton discussion that's going on.
Absolutely.
Especially putting into the context that Al Sharpton referred to Tavis Smiley's criticism as being anti-president, and considering that Al Sharpton's on an education campaign with none other than Newt Gingrich.
And Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah, Michael Bloomberg.
It's this organization.
$500,000 to go on this campaign to eliminate public schools.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get your remarks on that. Also, in terms of bold speech and scholarship, Houston Mayor's book, Betrayal, and his criticisms that he's leveled at you, Michael Eric Dyson, and Henry Louis Gates Jr. in terms of scholarship and how we can use that to bring forth bold voices.
Yeah, I appreciate both questions, but brother, we need seminar time for both of those queries. Let's start with the second one. Houston Baker is a towering literary critic who's made magnificent contributions to literary criticism and really just black studies and literary studies, who's attacked me pretty viciously in that text. God bless him. But I think his heart is in the right place because he wants to try to keep alive the best of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, 50th anniversary, so anniversary 2 weeks. We're going to go to that. We're going to attend that. But in doing that, he tries to characterize intellectuals who are highly visible on television and so on. And he spends most of his time on the Shelby Steeles and others, neoconservatives and neoliberals, and then he brings me in based on that one chapter that I wrote in Race Matters. It's actually a book that a chapter that I wrote owing to the wonderful support of Irving Howe and Paul Walzer, Michael Walzer, Irving Howe and Michael Walzer, called Nihilism in America. Some of you all might remember that essay in Race Matters. And there was a debate about that essay because it looked as if I was siding with neoconservatives because I was talking not only about social structure and institution, I was also talking about psyche, self-image, self-perception, behavior. And neoconservatives often talk about only behavior and psyche, and don't talk about social structure and institutions. I was talking about both, but it looked like I was opening myself to neoconservative readings of black oppression, especially in the lower social echelons of Chocolate City. And so I'd always count. I said, no, I'm talking about capital. I'm talking about commodification setting in across the board. So, for example, you go into the worst of hip-hop culture, and what do you see? The fetishism of commodities and the fetishism of sexual activity or orgasmic foreplay. That's true across the board in the society, you see. But that's not a devaluing of the people. It's what they're bombarded with, some embrace it, and how do we keep track of the resistance? Okay, there's one, and Chuck D, and Rod Digger, and the others resisted in hip-hop culture. And so in that regard, I think he's wrong about me, but his heart is in the right place, and I'm actually down to break bread with his brother, try to straighten him out on that. But his critiques on some of the other neoconservatives are right on the mark, you see. The first question about, you all know about Tavis Smiley, and you've been following that. We had an exchange last week that was pretty intense. Tavis Smiley has called for a meeting of black persons in Chicago in about 2 weeks. He had canceled the State of the Black Union after 10 years because he thought that, in fact, there was enough dialogue taking place to deal with situations in black context. But once, in fact, they had a meeting of black leaders in the White House about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, the day of the snow. So they were stuck in there. They only planned 15 minutes, had an hour and a half, and nobody could move. Then they came out in the snow and made an announcement talking about whether it's a black agenda or not. Barack Obama had told them that they'd not give the penny more than the stimulus, and he's concerned about 2012 as opposed to dealing specifically with black issues. They were upset on the inside. Outside, they appeared as if they were less upset. And Tavis got very, very upset. And it looked as if black people suffering was being marginalized in this context. And people say, well, I am the president of all America. I'm not president of black America. Okay. Didn't say that to the corporate executives. I'm not president of corporate executive of America. I'm president of all America. Said any other group? You know why? Is because if you have the kind of understanding of what a black agenda is, you know Frederick Douglass and A. Philip Randolph and Fannie Lou Hamer and Martin Luther King Jr. were never exclusively concerned with just black people. Never. The best agenda in America in the 1850s was the agenda of Frederick Douglass, along with William Lloyd Garrison and other abolitionists. And there's no Abraham Lincoln of any greatness without the abolitionist movement. You all know Lincoln supported the first proposed 13th Amendment that said there be slavery in America forever. First inaugural address. How do you get the shift from the first inaugural address to the second inaugural address, which is a masterpiece? You read that thing in the Lincoln Memorial. Pressure from social movement. The Frederick Douglass agenda was always for America. Martin Luther King the same way. It's a black agenda because it comes out of a Jim Crow people. It's for rights and liberties across the board. So what is the black agenda today? Job, 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 infrastructure, 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 education, 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 regulation of corporate elites, and the downsizing of banks. Wow, that doesn't sound like you're just talking about Jamal and Letitia. That's true. But it starts with Jamal and Letitia because somebody else's agenda is not going to include them. So this notion that black agenda is marginal and peripheral needs to be shattered. That's the thinking in the Obama administration. That's the narrowness we're talking about, see? And that's what we're going to talk about in this meeting. Now, Brother Al Sharpton is caught because Al Sharpton is a product of the black